Well, a formal welcome to everyone here. This is the informational webinar for the Open Data Policy Lab's City Incubator. This voice and perhaps head that you're seeing belongs to Adrian Schmoker. I'm a senior fellow with the GovLab, more recently also with the City of New York as the Deputy Chief Analytics Officer and as a director with the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. Also very pleased to be joined by Stefan, the co-founder and Chief Research and Development Officer of the Governance Laboratory, also known as GovLab, Andrew Young, the Knowledge Director at the GovLab, and Chris Wong, our guest speaker today, who's also a mentor with the City Incubator, head of product at Query, and a variety of other accolades and wonderful experiences under his belt. Really thrilled to have him joining us today. So just to reiterate again, because I think a few folks have just joined, today's session is going to be recorded. The recording will be up on the City Incubator website as a resource for folks, and we do encourage everyone to please stay on mute. We will have questions available at the end of the presentation today. Feel free to add questions in the chat in the meantime. Andrew is a wonderful resource in case you're having any technical issues. He's a fantastic Zoom troubleshooter, really grateful to have him for so many reasons as a part of this, but especially for that today. And then otherwise, just to quickly talk through what we'll be doing during this hour together. So Stefan will kindly guide us through an overview, just introducing everyone here to the GovLab and the Open Data Policy Lab. And then I'll provide a bit of an overview of the City Incubator. We'll have, as mentioned, Chris sharing a showcase of a data innovation from his time in public service, and then sharing a few additional details about the City Incubator program, including walking through the data innovation canvas, which is part of the application process. And we'll make sure that we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So with that, it's my pleasure to hand this over to the one and only Stefan, who will take you through an introduction to the GovLab and the Open Data Policy Lab. Stefan, over to you.
Thanks so much, Adrian, for this wonderful introduction, and thanks everyone for joining today as well. We are delighted with your interest, and I also realize that August is a difficult time for many, which is also why we are recording this for those that have expressed an interest but could not join today, in order to really learn more about what is the City Incubator and how can we work together moving forward. But as Adrian already mentioned, the City Incubator is an initiative of the Open Data Policy Lab, and the Open Data Policy Lab in itself is an initiative of the GovLab. And the GovLab is an action research center for those who don't have a clear understanding or have not come across the GovLab before. We are an action research center based here in New York. We are part of the New York University Department of Engineering, and our mission is to improve the way we go about making decisions in the public interest, leveraging new science and new technologies. And typically, what that has meant is that we have focused on what we call two important assets that we can leverage in new ways using technology to change the way we go about designing public services, making public decisions, solving public problems. And those two assets are, on the one hand, people. So we do a lot of work around people engagement, citizens engagement, collective intelligence. But the other asset, and that's why we're here today, is of course data, and how can we leverage data in new and innovative ways, and above all in responsible ways, to change the way we go about solving problems, making decisions, designing public services. And it is within that context that we have focused a lot, not just on leveraging data, but also how do we unlock data that might be not available unless we find an innovative way to actually access the data and reuse it in a way that is systematic and responsible. And that typically, of course, quite often is discussed with the code name open data. And so for the last few years, we've done a lot of work on opening data. but it's last year that we felt the need to accelerate some of that work and also build upon the foundation that was already built in the open data movement, in order to go the next wave, as we call it, and accelerate the movement of unlocking data to inform public interest decision making. And toward that end, next slide, Adrian, we developed and launched the Open Data Policy Lab, which, as written there, seeks to accelerate the responsible reuse of data by lowering existing barriers and building a center of expertise that will be available to all stakeholders in democratizing access to data. And as you can see, we are not only interested in unlocking government data, but also interested in unlocking private sector data that could be used by, for instance, public interest actors, including government, in order to design public services or improve the way we go about developing policies as well. Now, a key element of the Open Data Policy Lab has been the launch and the conceptualization of what we call the third wave of open data, which is really what we believe needs to happen in order to level up existing efforts as relates to open data. And the third wave of open data has four components. One is publish with purpose, so that we are more demand driven. Two, thinking about partnerships for data, such as data collaboratives. Three, doing so in a manner where data responsibility is at the core of the initiative. And lastly, doing this in cities in order to really accelerate the release and the use of data at the subnational level. And it is within that last big area that we feel is needed in order to accelerate the reuse of data that we have created the City Incubator. And Adrian will tell you more about it, but I just want to emphasize that we believe that the City Incubator is really the instrument to move us into the third wave of open data, where data innovation and data responsibility are center stage and can really be leveled up to build upon existing foundations that might already exist within your city, but that need some extra attention in order to really, as I said, go to the next wave. Over to you, Adrian, and I hope this set the stage on why we're doing this and within what context it was incubated itself. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Stefan. So the City Incubator, as Stefan mentioned, kind of nested within the GovLab at NYU and more specifically within the Open Data Policy Lab. So why cities and why data innovations? So our cities house more than half the world's population. I think, if to me, that is just an amazing idea, is that these ecosystems of, buildings, culture, people house, more than 50% of the world's population, and it is expected to grow and grow significantly by 2050. And the other key component here is yes, cities are important ecosystems. Municipal governments are going to become more and more important as being responsible for infrastructure and service delivery. But also, what is the role of data here? I think, over the last 18 months, we've all been a part of a pretty, for lack of a better term, extraordinary world event through a global pandemic with COVID-19, which is, not over. And it really showcased, I think, the importance of having robust data infrastructure, especially for local governments, that this data infrastructure for local governments is paramount. So what we believe, in having developed this City Incubator program that we'll be sharing more with you about today, is that we believe that by investing in the individuals, entrepreneurs and teams within city governments that are building out new data innovations, that we can actually better equip our cities for the future. So as a part of this project, we're really pulling on best practices from the startup ecosystem that has had incubator and accelerator programs for the better part of the last decade, and really taking that and applying it to the public sector and saying, we're going to invest in 10 entrepreneurs working in 10 different city governments around the world to help launch 10 different data innovations. And so, what that might sound interesting, Adrian, but what on earth do you mean by a data innovation? We fully recognize that this is a term that, we've kind of developed here, and that it's a broad term. And that's actually pretty intentional, because we really don't want to be prescriptive about what types of projects are a good fit for this program. We believe and fully understand that there's a broad set of initiatives out in the world and within city governments that might qualify as what we're calling a data innovation. We're not looking at one-time data analyses or maybe like a one-time hackathon, but something that is really building a tool or a process or a policy in order to support the development of insights and data-driven decision-making over the long term. So this could take a lot of different forms. You see a few different buckets listed here on the slide: publishing with purpose, engaging with the public, advancing open data. We fully believe that open data and having an open data program and portal is an important first step in developing a data ecosystem within city government and for the broader city ecosystem publicly. But that being said, once you've developed that platform, your work isn't over. There's so much more that you can do in building on top of that platform, whether it's from a programmatic perspective or a technical perspective. And then fostering partnerships and data collaboration. How might we leverage data outside of city walls in order to drive additional insights? And then last but not least, prioritizing data responsibility and data rights. So really taking the equity lens, thinking about risk, thinking about the end user, thinking about people, how they show up in the data, maybe developing a new governance structure, maybe creating a new process to enable the voice of the people within a data set to be considered when that data set is being used. All of this to really illustrate that we believe that there's a very broad and diverse, exciting ecosystem of things that qualify as a data innovation. So don't worry if you have an idea in mind that doesn't fit neatly within one of these buckets or definitions. That's completely fine. And in order to help provide a bit of an illustration of what we might mean by a data innovation, I'm really excited to invite Chris Wong, a good friend and former colleague, and also very fortunately signed up as a mentor for the City Incubator program, to share a brief overview of a data innovation that he's worked on in the past. And so it's my great pleasure to pass the mic and the screen over to Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, thanks for having me. So today, let me share first of all, but I think what we're going to do is take a look at this app called Community District Profiles. So let me start my timer that is off screen that you can't see, so I don't talk for too long. So this is a project that was built by my team and I at the Department of City Planning a few years back, still up and running and kicking. But I'll just kind of state the premise, like the problem statement first, and then I'll give you a quick little tour of it. But essentially, in New York City, we have community districts, which are basically like the lowest level of government in our city. Each district has a board, and that board is responsible for, they're responsible for like making requests to the city for infrastructure projects and capital projects. They're responsible for, who gets liquor licenses. They're responsible for lots of different opinions about quality of life in their districts and things like that. So the department that I worked for had the task of putting out information to these different community districts, things about their demographics, about their zoning. And this used to happen as PDFs. So every year somebody would have to sort of crunch all the numbers for the data, distribute these or publish them online. If there were any errors, there would be problems. So we felt that this lent itself well to becoming a digital product, because not only is it easier for the general public to sort of consume it as a website, it's also easier to make changes. And if there are errors found, it's easier to compare one district to another, for example, because you can kind of hop around quickly without having to deal with like paper or PDFs. So I'll start with just a quick jump in, and the very first thing that the user sees here is a map, because if you ask 9 out of 10 New Yorkers, if you ask New Yorkers what community district they live in, most of them probably can't tell you. So the first thing we need people to be able to do is actually find out where their community district is. So if I did, for example, 35 4th Avenue. We have a little, search here where I can actually start typing in an address and it'll just tell me, this is Brooklyn Community District 6. We also just let you just use the map and click on the one that you want if you happen to know roughly where you live. So there's a couple different ways in, which is great. You can also do the same search here. So we kind of duplicated that, but let's just say I wanted to go to Brooklyn Community District 6. Well, I'll just start typing again, Brooklyn 6. Oh, that didn't. Okay, there we go. Oh, that actually found my spot on the map. Let's see. Let's just click on the community district. Okay, so now for the moment you've all been waiting for, here's some data. So yeah, these are basically standardized profiles. So we've got indicators, we've got the built environment, we've got the floodplain, we've got capital projects, and we've got resources. So you can see kind of at the top of the list is demographic data. And we can tell you basically what is the population from the last census and the previous census to that. And we can see that there hasn't been much population change in this particular district. We can see the density, we can see the racial breakdown, we can see the population pyramid. These are all very common, common analyses that may be done on their own separately to kind of put them all in one place and make it more of a dashboard is kind of interesting. These are really fun to build, actually, these little charts, because here we're actually showing where this district fits within. If you take all 59 districts in the city, you can kind of see where that one lies contextually for things like underage 18 population. So we're kind of right in the middle in this district versus be very close to the end on rent burden, so very low rent burden in this district, etc. So you can kind of explore these and see how a district that you're interested in compares to others. We also have the land use and zoning for the area. So this is city planning data that that most people at the department are well versed in and is already public, which is great. But basically, it means we can take little snippets of these for a specific district and make these little interactive maps. So these are actually, you could think of as subsets of larger apps that deal with these particular data sets. Facilities. This is another data set built by the same agency about government facilities. So this is kind of everything that government touches, including schools and senior centers and sanitation facilities and things like that. So you can actually hover over each one of these guys and see what they are. Things like the floodplain, which are very important if you're doing construction projects. And we can keep going down here. Yeah, so there's a few. I think this one's not loading the land use applications right now, but at the end we have tons of resources, so we can link you out to lots of other things that are relevant to this community district. And like I said, you can kind of click around on this map and hop around to different districts. Let's see if that works for the demo. Maybe not. Let's go back up and click from here. No, maybe not. I can just scroll down the list and say, let's go to Manhattan 7. Eek. Live demos. Okay, you get the idea. So go ahead and check it out. It's called Community Profiles. And then I'll leave you with a few quick slides because this was built by a team called Planning Labs, which I founded and ran for a couple of years. But basically, we're interested in building projects with open technology, using agile methodologies, and really putting an emphasis on human-centered design. These are not typical things you think of when you think of government software projects. So we're trying to, inject this sort of new way of thinking. I wouldn't even say it's new for government, but new ways of thinking about how we build digital products in government. These are our core values. We want our projects to be open by default. We want to build with and not for. We want to ship early and ship often, which basically just means to iterate a lot, make your products continuously better. And we want to document a lot and disseminate. So all of our code was open source. I think it still is. And we put out as much information as we can. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate you joining us. And I think hopefully for folks who are joining us today and also watching this over the next few weeks, have an introduction to both an example of a data innovation and a really fantastic mentor who's very thankfully a part of the City Incubator program as well. Thanks so much, Chris.
Take care.
All right. So the other key thing I want to mention, just coming off of Chris's presentation, is that I think what's really exciting about what Chris just demonstrated is that it's been a few years since Chris has been a part of this team, and this tool is still available. And minus a few like live demo glitches, is still operational. And that's another key part of what we're looking for in a data innovation, is really taking the first steps towards launching something that's going to last beyond you. Because as an innovator, you don't want your project to live and die based on where you are. You really want to seed and help grow new initiatives that are going to live beyond you. And that's especially important within public service. So what else do we provide besides access to wonderful humans like Chris? So there's another list of some of the other mentors that are a part of the City Incubator program available here on the slide. There's additional mentors listed up on the platform. And we're continuing to recruit mentors for select skill sets and industry expertise as well. So in addition to this group of mentors, another key component of the City Incubator program is being able to be part of an international community of peers. So if you work within government and city government, I would say almost especially, you're pretty familiar with the idea of being siloed. Unfortunately, large bureaucratic organizations, I would say whether governmental or not in nature, silos tend to happen pretty naturally. And as an industry with government across borders, it's also really hard to identify peers who are working on similar things, similar challenges. And so one of the core things that we are really providing through the City Incubator experience is the ability to be able to learn from, connect with others who are also launching data innovations in other cities across the world. Other elements are really kind of the programming component. So you've met a few members of the Open Data Policy Lab team here today. Stefan, Andrew, myself, there's a variety of other team members who are a part of this program and who would be working with you over the course of the 6 months of the City Incubator. We're developing curriculum covering a variety of different topics to support data innovation development and launch. There'll also be discussions with guest speakers who are practitioners in government and also in other fields of innovation. And then, because the City Incubator program is also about taking a data innovation from idea to implementation, we'll be having different project check-ins and opportunities also to present your work along the way. And moving into the visibility component of this, one thing that can often happen with innovative data work is that the data innovation that Chris just showcased is thankfully a public resource, but not all data innovations are public resources. And so therefore they don't often get the limelight, and those who are working behind the scenes to make them a reality and a powerful and helpful tool for colleagues across the city or for other stakeholders don't often get the opportunity to share this product, policy, governance structure that they've developed. And so we're really interested in, for folks who are a part of the City Incubator to have the opportunity to tell the story of this project and to tell the story of this program participants as well. And so ways that we'll be doing that is facilitating a final presentation to civic tech leaders at the end of the program in March, and also looking for different ways to profile the participants in the program over the course of the program. And one element that I want to touch on with that is that while it is a program for what we're calling entrepreneurs within city government, we know that innovation is a team sport. So we are looking to make certain elements of the programming available to your team members along the way as well. And then lastly, but not least, we're very fortunate to have a variety of partners helping us along the journey of building the City Incubator program and having it available to these 10 entrepreneurs we'll be supporting from September to March. MasterCard City Possible will be making available apps, tools, and other services from their City Insights digital marketplace to program participants as well. And so when is all of this happening? A few weeks ago, we were very excited to announce the City Incubator program. We actually just last Friday received our first set of early applications, and we'll be sharing feedback on those applications tomorrow. But otherwise, the final application for everyone is at the end of this month, August 31st. The program itself, program participants will be announced in mid-September, with the programming itself running from late September of this year into March of 2022. And so who is a good fit here? Hopefully if you're joining us today and also watching this recording, you're asking yourself, what about this project? What about that project? So just to go over a few key components of what we're looking for applicants here. And we've really kind of divided this up and are thinking about it in two different ways. One is thinking about the individual who's going to be, primarily participating cohort and helping to create kind of this peer community over the course of the 6 months. In the same way that the startup ecosystem really takes a look at the founder, the CEO, and the team behind the company, we want to make sure that we're also taking a close look at the individuals who are applying for the City Incubator program. And so a few key elements to touch on. So you must be a municipal government employee. So not a vendor, not a contractor, but actually employed by your municipal government. We are looking for folks to have a certain level of seniority. We know that, pretty much everyone, unless you're the mayor, is going to have a boss. But we want to make sure that, you do have a certain level of decision-making authority over the data innovation concept that you're submitting. And then otherwise, because we are really looking to be intentional around the peer learning opportunity, we'll be facilitating, monthly peer exchanges with those participating in the program. We want to make sure that in some ways this isn't your first rodeo, that you have another project that you can showcase or share learnings from with this cohort. And so we'll be asking about that as a part of the application process as well. And then in terms of the time commitment, so we're estimating that the commitment comes to about 7 hours per month, which breaks down to a bit under 2 hours a week on average, to actually take part in and prepare for the programming that takes place. Now, this does not count the time that we're expecting you to allocate to actually moving your data innovation forward. This is just the programmatic commitment. And we want to make sure that as a part of the application process that that's understood and that you agree to that. And then if you are selected to participate, we'll be asking you to review and agree to our code of conduct. The program itself will be taking place in English and be virtual. And then lastly, we'll be asking for a signed statement from leadership in your organization indicating approval for your participation if you are selected. And that is a part of the application process as well. And then in terms of the data innovations, so as you heard me share earlier, the definition of a data innovation, we're intentionally keeping broad. We're very excited to be able to see a diverse set of submissions. So if you're asking yourself, does this count as a data innovation? You're welcome to get in touch with the team if you really want to check, but otherwise, I will say that, this is all of the criteria, the content on these slides are available up on our website. But the criteria for data innovation submission, so really thinking about, is your innovation data powered? Tell us a little bit about the data that your data innovation will be using or that you're hoping to procure. Responsibility focused. So share a little bit about like the values that you have. Chris, even in the short 5-minute window that he had, made sure that he shared kind of the values that his team had in building their data innovations. Being impact driven. So we don't want to be innovative for innovation's sake. We want to make sure that there's an end result that is going to help the people and residents and folks who call your city home. So make sure that you share with us, the end impact, which, I think with data infrastructure and data innovation projects, it can be so easy to think about the operations of like setting up the dashboard or creating the policy. You want to make sure that you take the time to take a step back and communicate, how this is going to make a difference for your constituents. And then community-centric, really bringing human-centered design principles in, who are different community groups, partners that it might make sense to partner with. And then future thinking. So this goes to kind of the concept of wanting to make sure that the data innovations aren't, a one-time analytics project and not like a one-time event, but something that is really going to be able to be used on an ongoing basis or replicated. Now, that being said, we know that, not all innovation lasts forever. So, if you are launching your project and then the winds change, we completely understand that happens, but we'd like there to be an intention towards building something sustainable. All right, so a little bit about the how. What does this application process look like? So as mentioned, final applications are due by August 31st. There is an online application form. We use Typeform. There's also a PDF of the application questions that you can download from the City Incubator website if you'd like to take a look at the questions in advance and maybe create a draft before your final submission. You'll have to, as mentioned, agree to the length of the program, have a letter of commitment from your organization's leadership. And then we're going to be asking you about what we're calling a data innovation canvas. And I'm going to go ahead and walk us through that now. This is a tool that our team is very excited about. We were very committed to the idea of making sure that the application process itself would hopefully be helpful to potential applicants in helping to kind of frame what your data innovation actually is. The inspiration for this came from the idea of a business plan. What might it look like to have a business plan for your data innovation? And so, not to worry, no one needs an MBA to fill out the data innovation canvas. It is not a business plan. But the idea is, how could we actually structure the core components of what it's necessary to think through in the early stages of the development of a data innovation. So this is the data innovation canvas itself. You might have already seen it if you've clicked around on the City Incubator website and the application section of the site. And so when you do actually click through the link on the website, you'll be taken to an online Google slide presentation. The first slide will have these instructions. You are encouraged to download it. We recommend ODP document or Microsoft PowerPoint so that you have your own copy. So we won't be sharing the slide deck with you. You'll need to download a version that you will then fill out yourself. And as mentioned, the data innovation canvas is really meant to be a helpful tool. And it's the actual completed slide deck that we want you to submit. And so, coming back to the canvas, this will be, the final deliverable, but we do have these different slides and we would like you to use them as a bit of a sandbox. So think of them as your rough draft as you're kind of moving through the canvas. So you can see in the upper left-hand corner here, focusing first on value proposition. Who is the user that you're looking to help with this? Who will receive the ultimate impact from the project? Moving to the next section of methods and deliverables. What are you proposing? What is it called? Tell us its name. What will it do? Will it be a product, a process, a policy, or something else? And how will you measure success? I think data-driven projects or data projects and data innovation projects don't always necessarily actually have metrics tied to them. So we're curious, how you're thinking of measuring that success if you have some ideas there. Cost and resources. So continuing to move through the canvas here. What are your preliminary ideas on what you'll need to get this off the ground? Partners and stakeholders. Who will need to be involved and why? Who is your team? What are their skill sets? Risks. So thinking through the potential harm through this initiative. And this isn't meant to say that the initiative is bad, but it's really kind of taking the lens of responsibility of every new thing takes up space, and what's the potential shadow at play? Thinking through what harm might come from this, and also what legal, reputational, and organizational risks are at play. What is the legal landscape? And then last but not least, open questions. The purpose of the Canvas is not to show that you've figured everything out, that you have everything buttoned up. The City Incubator program is meant to be a 6-month program to help you in further developing and launching the data innovation. So this is a space for you to share kind of what your open questions are, what you haven't figured out yet, what you'd like to research further. You know, we're here to help you on this journey. That is what the City Incubator is about. So, you know, tell us a little bit of where you're uncertain, where you feel like you need some help. This is a safe space for that. And so then the final deliverable is coming back to the Canvas itself and filling out essentially your final version within each of these boxes. And then as a part of the application process, you'll have one of the fields enables you to upload your final slides within the application process there. And so with that, I hope that you were inspired by some of, you know, the ideas, themes, questions that were raised here today. Hopefully, you know, we have a few data entrepreneurs working in city government that are on the line or listening to the recording. We would absolutely love for you to join us. We'd love to hear about your data innovation. You know, this is a team that gets ridiculously excited about hearing about new data related projects that are happening in city governments around the world. So we're excited to meet you, to see your projects, and to hopefully have the opportunity to work together from September to March through the City Incubator. And with that, we'll go ahead and move to Q&A. I'll ask Andrew, should I stop sharing my screen at this point? Would that be helpful?
Why not see everyone, well, all of the panelists' faces here. And for the folks on the call, feel free to add a question to the Q&A channel on the bottom panel of your Zoom window, or raise your hand if you have a question about the incubator program. Adrian, it looks like you described it impeccably.
So one question that I received the other day, actually, I'll go through two questions that I received just within the last day, which will be updated on the FAQ. So one question that I received was, so the City Incubator is part of the Open Data Policy Lab. Does that mean that my project needs to be open data related? And the answer is no. So as you know, mentioned before, you know, open data is definitely a core foundation within kind of the data maturity spectrum for city government. And we would anticipate that probably any data innovation project would leverage some form of open data. But if your project does not, that's okay. That is not a prerequisite for a project, is kind of engagement with an open data portal. And then another question that I received was, is it possible to submit more than one data innovation idea? And the answer there is yes. You're welcome to submit more than one application. You would just need to fill out a separate data innovation canvas for that idea and essentially fill out the entirety of the application twice. But you are able to kind of submit under the same name for two different data innovations. Only one of those would be considered ultimately for the program, but that is a possibility.
Great. And then we have a question from Jane here on whether the program is pertinent / available to any city in the world. Do you want to reflect on that, Adrian?
Sure. The answer there is yes. So we're very excited to make this a global program. So I would just say yes with a lot of exclamation points. It is definitely open to anyone working in city government, any city government around the world.
Thanks for your question, Jane. Any other questions from the group? Here we go. So we have a question from Duncan here. So I'll just read it quickly. So Duncan is employed by a foundation that is run for a CUNY, for a City University of New York, for those who aren't familiar, and funded by an interagency agreement. So I'm the foundation, but paid by city government. I'm working on a massive buildings related data project that is co-funded by the US Department of Energy and would have applicability across many other cities. How can I apply? Do I do so under a city government sponsor?
That's a very interesting question, and really glad to have you on this call, Duncan. As someone who formerly worked for the City of New York, I understand the complexities that sometimes come into play with those arrangements. I would say maybe we can talk a little bit more offline to better understand your setup and explore kind of a pathway forward for a potential application. And otherwise, you know, Andrew, Stefan, if you'd like to chime in as well, please do, of course.
Yeah, thanks, Duncan, for that question. And obviously, it seems like you're in the right spot for developing a data innovation. But I think part of the concern and also opportunity that we want to leverage is to make sure that any data innovation is taken seriously by the city and subsequently implemented. So in your, and again, as Adrian said, it would be good to learn more, but I think if there is an opportunity to really, anyway, have some kind of city sponsorship that indicates that the city is committed to the data innovation that you will develop during the incubator period, I think that is something that would make us would allow us to evaluate the application vis-a-vis the area of possible implementation within the city. And I think as such, I think that would be recommended.
And now a quick follow-up question around whether there will be a next round. And Duncan, just for clarification, as in a second iteration of the incubator, like a year two, or a second round of applications, just to make sure that we understand. Year two, that is certainly the intention.
Yes, that's true. And so the intent is here, of course, this is year one, or at least, anyway, it doesn't have to be year one, it's the version one. And obviously we will try to apply the same principles of the incubator and apply them to the incubator itself and learn from actually the way we go about this time, and then redesign, or if needed, and launch a second version following the first version. That's the intent. Just as a matter of transparency, the funding for the incubator comes from Microsoft, but we also have additional supports from foundations such as Luminate, who anyway support the Open Data Policy Lab and GovLab as it relates to the data work. And so that's where, that's also why, we don't request funding from any participant, but also why we are thinking of a more longer term engagement as well. And then there is a question, Andrew, I guess, from Muhammad.
Yes, question here from Muhammad. He's not an employee, but really interested in the program. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for students to be involved. And I think that the answer there would be that if there are students who could be part of a program that is led by a city actor, then that would certainly be something that would be great to bring that capacity to bear. But as far as a student or an academic kind of submission or a primary applicant, that probably would not be a good fit, since this is meant to be more city government focused in terms of applicants.
Great. All right. So with that, and I'm sensitive to everyone's time, I suggest that we close today's webinar. But obviously, if you are having any other questions or any other recommendations for us, because as I mentioned, we are not just assuming that we have figured this all out. This is meant to be an effort that serves you in your data innovation initiative. And if there are any suggestions on I could help this, or I could anyway, be helped by this, or I will need more of something else, let us know and we can adjust it. And I think there was one more question before we close here. Do quasi-government organizations work for this? Again, hard to judge without further details. I would say that might work as long as it's within a city, right? And because it's meant to be a city incubator. And of course, I realize that anyway, city, right, and especially city government has a variety of ways to express themselves. And if this is a quasi-government board, I think that might make the fit as well, as long as there is a clear connection with how the city is operating and how it impacts residents as well.
Yes, I would just tag on to that. If you you can definitely get in touch with the team to share more specifics, and we're happy to discuss that. And I think that Stefan was leading us to a wrap up, and perhaps interrupted by an alarm. So I might.
Yeah, now it's gone. So that was the appropriate fire alarm that always goes off at the end of somehow a Zoom call that I'm on. But again, thanks everyone for joining. We are really thrilled, and thanks Adrian and Andrew for introducing the incubator. We are really thrilled with this opportunity to work together with all of you. If you have any questions, Adrian is the person to ask, or you can also send a question to all of us via datastewards@thegovlab.org. And looking forward to all of your applications for those that are interested in joining us moving forward. Thank you so much and stay safe.